Tim Legler in our studio. Let's run the floor. Legs. Joel Embiid dropped 44 in a win over the Cavs yesterday. What did you see from Philly?
Impressive win on the road against a good team. Joel Embiid dominant once again. And James Harden wasn't great, but he was very good in the fourth quarter, getting to the line and making the game a lot easier for Embiid. That's what it's all about for James Harden playing point.
Embiid still hanging in that MVP race as well. Speaking of which, we had on ABC Luka and the Mavs knocking out Giannis and the Bucks by 6. What did you see here?
Yeah, Luka Doncic was absolutely spectacular in this game as a scorer, as a playmaker. This game was back and forth the entire way. Dallas takes over in the fourth quarter. Dallas quietly has played themselves into a role now where you can see them actually doing some damage in the Western Conference playoffs.
They're only one game behind Golden State right now, and Luka, from about the midpoint of the season on, has been as good as anybody in the sport. Speaking of which, there's Kevin Durant. The good news on Saturday night was he scored 55 points. The bad news is it wasn't enough. The Hawks beat the Nets 122-115. Listen to KD after that defeat.
Put him in a bonus early every quarter. 37-14 free throw mix. And it's not because of the refs. It was like because we reaching and being undisciplined and just playing too aggressive, you know? So it's like just fouls. And we can't do that if we want to be a winning team. You know, even though guys are missing shots and, you know, it's the detailed stuff we got to just lock in on and do better.
So what he's pointing out is what you can clearly see if you watch them play. They can't stop anybody. And so the question is, with Kevin Durant at full strength and Kyrie Irving at full strength and the other pieces they've put around them, they're going to be in the play, and that seems basically to be in stone. Can they make that deep run in the Eastern Conference we've all been projecting?
Well, I'll tell you what, first of all, let's save that clip, because that's the only time you're going to hear a player say it wasn't the refs when there's that kind of a free throw disparity. Really, honesty right there out of KD, because he knows there are issues on the defensive end of the floor. Like, I think it's more likely that they go out early than they make a playoff run. And look, Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving on the floor at the same time, they're going to give you a chance every night to win any one game. The problem is when you get into a playoff series, assuming they get out of the play-in, you now have an ability to start to tweak your game plan against those two guys. And if you make them just a little bit less efficient, the fact that they can't really stop anybody, they can't grind out wins. They're going to have to win shootouts because they play smaller lineups. They're soft defensively. You can get where you need to. They can get beat up on their own defensive glass. So they can't get to 5 or 6 stops consecutively when you have to in a tight spot. You're just going to have to continue to rely on great shot making out of two players. That's not a formula for long-term postseason success, particularly when you're going to play teams eventually, if you go farther, teams like Miami that are great defensively, teams like Philadelphia that can play really good defense, Milwaukee as well, Boston, been the best defensive team in the league. Those are the 4 teams you're looking at the top. You're not going to win a series against a team like that. That could beat them 4 times when you can't string together 4 or 5 stops in the fourth quarter of games. And that's what Kevin Durant is alluding to, and he's 100% right.
We'll see. There's no reason at this point to believe that they're going to get Ben Simmons back in any meaningful way to make a run here. So they're going to have to do what those 2 guys, plus the cast they've put around them, Seth Curry and some of the other pieces. Let's go back to Philly, who we saw at the beginning of that rip. When they first made that deal, and for the first week or maybe a little longer than that, it looked so good. Since then, maybe not so much. Philly versus the Nets. Who's got the deeper shelf life, do you think, in the playoffs this year?
Wow, the Nets, that might be the one team the Nets could take care of, because I think Philadelphia is relying so heavily on James Harden being great. If he's not great, as much as he dominates the ball, they're going to have a very difficult time regardless of how good Joel Embiid has been, because you're talking about a center. There are ways to address centers defensively when you get into a playoff series in terms of taking the ball out of his hands, hitting him with blitzes whenever you can, and then it really falls on James Harden to bail you out. I don't think James Harden is the same player that he was at his peak in Houston. He just doesn't have the ability to win every matchup that's in front of him individually. That's what he relied on for years in Houston. He struggles with that on a night-to-night basis now. So if you get into a series and you could come up with a game plan game to game to adjust to Embiid, they don't have a lot of three-point shooting. They're last in the league in bench scoring. And James Harden is not consistently great the way that he was 4 or 5 years ago. That doesn't sound like a great formula for Philly. And Brooklyn might be the one team, because of the greatness of KD and Kyrie, they could get through a series against a team like Philadelphia for all the reasons that I just stated. I just don't know that Philly right now, after seeing a large enough sample size with these 2 guys together, I don't know that they're in the same category as a Milwaukee and a Miami. Boston, I don't know. Robert Williams, that's a big loss. And Brooklyn, obviously, we just talked about their issues. But I think Milwaukee, Miami are on a different shelf right now maybe than Philly.
So interestingly, when all is said and done, after the trade that shook up everything with Simmons and Harden and all of that, you don't think either of these teams winds up in the conference final?
If I had to bet money on it right now, I think Milwaukee's going back to the finals. I think they've got their 3 stars healthy. They're just getting Brook Lopez back, and what he means defensively, you can't overstate that. And also, Pat Connaughton was out for a long time. So their rotation is rounding into form, and they've got their 3 stars healthy, and Giannis is playing at an MVP level once again. If I had to put money on it, Greeny, today, I would say Milwaukee goes back to the finals.
All right, we will see. Thank you for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.